All right, so today is the five modes, and I'm just going to write out what the five modes are, and then we'll talk about them because this is actually pretty self-explanatory. Like this isn't a big mystery. But the first mode, and these are in no particular order, but we'll say moving. And this is the modes of the human body. So from the time that you wake up, from the time that you go to sleep at night, you are very likely in one of these five modes at all times. And so we want to do our practice when we're in these modes. And I also have formal practices. A formal practice is a practice that you do at a particular time, in a particular way, in a particular ritualistic type of setting. And it's called the four modes. So I have some formal practices like yoga and other types of movement that are based around the five modes. So moving, standing, sitting, lying down. And then the fifth one is kind of like a squat or crouch. This is like if you're gardening, or what are some other, if you play catcher for a baseball team, you're going to be kind of in that squatting slash crouching position. But these would cover the five modes. So we want to be doing our four directions practice inside of these five modes. So whenever I'm moving, I want to be doing my practice. Whenever I'm standing, I want to be doing my practice. Whenever I'm sitting, I want to be doing my practice. Whenever I'm laying down, I want to be doing my practice. Whenever I am in a squatting or crouching position, I want to be doing my practice. Now, something that we'll flesh out and talk about a little bit more later are these individual modes, because the mode itself can become a toolbox. What I mean is you can have very particular points of attention depending on the mode that you're in. And I think that would be actually quite natural. So if somebody is doing the five modes with their four directions, I think quite naturally you're going to start to notice that it's different between sitting and standing, between standing and moving. So where we put our attention can also change. It should still be intended in advance. It should still be declared, and we should still go back to it when we redirect. But it's just another way to classify and categorize your points of attention so that you can remember them. That's the reason for all the organization. It's not to make it look more academic. It's not even really designed to make it more deliverable necessarily. It's meant to make it something that you can remember to do. Because if you don't remember to do it, then you're not doing it. And then all we're doing is talking about it. And the world has enough of that. The world has enough of talking about stuff, thinking about stuff, having ideas about stuff, but then not really crossing the divide, not crossing that bridge between chit chat and the active element of awareness, because they are not the same. So five modes. I'm sitting right now. I have very particular points of attention when I'm sitting. And it's a little bit different than when I'm standing because my body is in a different mode. My body has different habits depending on what mode it's in. I have sitting habits that are different than laying down habits. And spoiler alert, everybody has habits to some extent, right? It's really about being aware of these things and making sure that we're not existing in extremes. So one of the habits that I would have when I would lay down is to cross my ankles. Well, it's not really great for my posture. It's not really great for my chi and blood flow. So when I see myself doing that, I just redirect and uncross them. But that's not an issue when I walk. I don't really have an issue crossing my legs when I walk. Otherwise, I'd be falling on my face every 5 seconds. But maybe different issues when I walk is I'm not always going heel to toe. And if I'm not going heel to toe, I don't have good body mechanics. And I'm probably just falling into the earth all the time with every step. And eventually that will start to cause tension, and chi and blood and body fluids won't flow as well. And, that will lead to suffering and disease, sickness eventually. So these modes are really important, and they really do vary depending on which mode you're in. When I'm in the laying down mode, my breath changes because I can use gravity. Whereas when I'm standing up, the diaphragm and the breathing mechanism is just a little bit different. So I can feel my belly expand much easier when I'm laying down. So you heard the term abdominal breathing. It's not my favorite term. Because what are we really talking about? Is rectus abdominis doing the breathing? Maybe it's an accessory to the overall breathing mechanism, but it's the diaphragm. Like the diaphragm is the one that's doing the majority. And then the differentiation and pressure between the lungs and the general atmosphere. It's an exchange of pressure that also helps to perform the work in the act of breathing. So ideally, we want to have toolboxes in these 5 different directions so that we just have more tools and we're more prepared and it's more specific to what we're doing, right? So if I have a bunch of standing points of attention while I'm laying down, I could get lost with my practice. I'm like, this isn't really doing anything, trying to pay attention to heel to toe, but I'm not moving. So what am I doing? I'm just paying attention to my foot at that point, which is okay if that's an intended point in advance that's in my toolbox that I have declared, paying attention to my feet, that's fine. But the point is that, how you interact with these points of attention can be different. And that really does lend to a basic principle that we'll talk about later, that the practice really does need to be diverse. It really needs to have a lot of situationalness to it. And we talk about that when we get into situations and segmenting. And situational is something that maybe we would have called battlegrounds in the past. But battlegrounds are basically what we would say in areas that felt more challenging. People don't really prefer that terminology. I don't care. Battleground's a battleground. It's like, whatever. But for the sake of others, we could talk about it a little bit differently. So we could just talk about it as, areas that are a little choppier in our practice. So we can prepare for those in a way that's very similar to how we would prepare for the 5 modes. And that's why another reason that going over the 5 modes is so important, because it illustrates that principle perfectly. Because the 5 modes, your tricks of attention in each of the modes will feel very different if you try to just make it the same. Why would I do that? Going to the clinic is different than going to the school. Going to the school is different than going to the dentist. Going to the dentist is different than going to Trader Joe's. I'm still going somewhere, but there's a lot of individuality to where I'm going, and therefore there should be a lot of individuality in relation to my mind practice, because it needs to be adaptable to the situations that I'm in. And the 5 modes practice really helps to illustrate that. So one of the things that I would recommend is you could write this out if writing things out is your jam, but definitely considering what are my points of attention in each of these modes. And when I enter or transition between modes, am I really paying attention to this stuff? Or is it just wishful thinking? Is it just a good idea, but I'm not really doing it? Is that principle that I'm trying to illustrate? The differentiation of your techniques relative to what you're doing, relative to your environment. That's really what the 5 modes brings out. But it also is the embodiment factor, because if you're doing your practice in each of these 5 modes, you're doing it all the time because you're always in these 5 modes. So again, these are the elements of the 5 modes, and the 5 modes fits inside of the 4 directions.